Please be seated. If I can do my duty as a Christian ought, if I can bring back beauty to a world uproar, if I can spread love's message that the Master taught, then my living shall not be in vain. That song is the second verse of a song written by Alma Irene Bazell, Androzio Thompson. She wrote it in 1945 for the National Tuberculosis Society. We know from reading and history that this song became one of Martin Luther King's favorites. And it's for good reason that it did. When you listen to those lyrics, it sort of sums up what Martin Luther King was about. Now, given that it is Martin Luther King weekend, we get to somewhat depart from, or perhaps defer, or put on hold, if you would, preaching directly from the gospel or from the scriptures. Although we know that Martin Luther King himself was a preacher and a Christian, and much of what he did, he based in Christianity. So we won't be departing too far from those scriptures when we talk about his dream. Now, one more preliminary thing about what I want to say today is to acknowledge that Martin Luther King weekend, and even having someone preach about Martin Luther King, is not easy for everyone. There's still, after now 60 years, this year celebrates 60 years since the I Have a Dream speech. If we're honest, talking about Martin Luther King, talking about racism, talking about oppression of one people by another people, still brings up some bitter feelings by folk. And we just need to acknowledge that. We need to acknowledge that for some, hearing about Martin Luther King is a reminder of a time that now is past, but it's a reminder of a time that goes even further back. It's a reminder of a time when people were put in chains. It's a reminder of a time when people were sold into slavery. It's a reminder of a time when people were brutally beaten, families separated. It's a reminder of a time that many of us would like to forget. And believe me, the descendants of that time would like to forget it too. We don't want to always be thinking about what happened to those folk who preceded us, people who, in many cases, built this country. We don't want to think about that, because to think about it means that we have to, in our own ways, own it ourselves. We don't want to believe that we were part or connected to people who were so unjustly treated. And when I say the word unjust, I'm being kind. Because to acknowledge it means that perhaps there's something still wrong with us. There's something still that makes us untouchable or unaccepted in this country. If we were treated like that, if people saw us as less than human, and if systems were built around a fundamental belief that we weren't human, surely those systems continue to hold up that notion in some ways today. And we don't want to think about that. But there's the truth. If you look at all data and statistics, you see that the remnants of that time stay with us. You see that black people and people of color are still disproportionately poor, still disproportionately sick, still disproportionately uneducated, still disproportionately in prisons. And here's where the tension comes, right? Because people today will say, well, that was 400 some years ago when all that happened. Certainly, we should be past that by now. It's not our fault that these horrible statistics persist. It's not our fault that after 400 years, you all are still struggling to find a foothold in this country. So that's where the tension comes in. That's why people don't want to talk about this Martin Luther King thing, because it takes us back to trying to figure out whose fault it is. And if I was born 20 years ago, how can I be blamed for the fact that people of color are still struggling in this country to find equality? Well, I think we know why, although there are, my opinion, 4 or 5 different types of people in this country. The first person is the person who says, well, there is no racism. No such thing as racism. I don't see race. To me, everybody the same. We were raised to treat everybody the same. And then there are people who see racism, they acknowledge it, but they don't think it's systemic or part of some grand plan. They basically think that's that person's problem. It's a one-on-one situation that we have to overcome. And if we can just address those people who have racist issues, then we'll be fine. And then there's a third person. Third person is the one who sees racism, knows that it's not interpersonal, believes that it is structural and systemic in our country. But they don't think anything can be done about it. It's just the way it is, and we're just going to have to deal with it. And then finally, there's the person who sees that there is racism, that it is structural and systemic, and yes, something can and should be done about it. Martin Luther King was that person. But even to this day, we have people all along that spectrum, our friends and family members. If we could draw a map, they'll be all over that particular spectrum. And so to deal with this, what we've done is we've built and we are building laws, which again, Martin Luther King had a lot to do with the creation of these laws and new social conventions to help us address this pernicious problem of racism. And even today, We have discussions that go on in government offices, that go on in businesses, places of employment, maybe even churches. I think our church, the Episcopalian Church, has made one of its two objectives during Bishop Curry's tenure is to address the issue of race. The second is to evangelize a little bit more, but to address the issue of race. So we're having these discussions now, and we're trying to have these discussions in ways that are less tense, but they will be tense. Because what I need to feel comfortable in an environment and to feel that people around me are not racist, and I'm going to use that word, is very different than what some other people might feel. A lot of it depends on how we were raised, how we were brought up, how we see the world. And so what I need to feel comfortable in an environment, included, is very different. There's no standard for how we should be treated and how we should treat each other. And so we get into this discussion, and what we come away with is that maybe this dream is not a destination. Maybe this dream is a journey. Maybe what we're saying is that all of us have to find ways to move further along this continuum toward justice. And so what does that mean? Well, we have this thing that we all know called the Golden Rule. Everybody remembers the Golden Rule, that we should do unto others as we would have them do unto us. The Golden Rule. And maybe that can help, right, with this whole issue of treating people differently. Because the systems have to be changed, we know that, but people have to change in order for the systems to change. Okay. And maybe we should take that golden rule a step further. Because again, what I need might be very different than what you need. So author Stephen Covey has come up with an amendment to that convention, and I will just call it an add-on. I think the golden rule still stands. But what if we were also to say, and then we're going to look at whether we're treating a person the way that person wants to be treated. Doesn't cover it completely, because that person may want to be treated in a way that we think is horrible. And so we're not going to do that. So our baseline might be, we're going to treat a person the way we want to be treated as a minimum. But then we're going to extend it to find out more about how that person wants to be treated. And if that standard is a little higher than our standard, then we're going to maybe seek to do that. And that requires work. That requires getting to know people. It requires trying to understand a bit more about them, about their history, about how they live, about what's important to them. It requires, maybe, that we do this thing in this song that Martin Luther King loved so much. Cheer somebody, show somebody, and help somebody. Ultimately, where we've evolved with the King Day is somewhat away from the whole discussion of race, because again, it brings so much tension, to a place where we're saying, in order for all of us to live in a society where we will be judged not by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character, in order for us to get to that place, we have to dig down into ourselves and find this love that Jesus talks about. We have to be willing to put our fears aside, because all of this is fear. Fear that goes back to the beginning of man. Fear that if we stood in front of a lion, that wasn't so wise. We better get away from that lion because that lion is going to take our lives. And we began to put things in categories. Lion, dangerous. Baby, safe. We began to collect categories. People from my family, safe. People from another family, maybe not. Tribes, safe. I know this tribe, they're safe. This tribe is not so safe. We even feel this sensation. We call it fight or flight. I don't know how many of you stood up on a podium and have been asked to give a talk, and it feels like there's a bear behind you, the same reaction going on in your body as if somebody was chasing you with a weapon. That same feeling, that I want to be anywhere but here. That feeling of fear that we get when we experience difference can sometimes be very misleading. The boxes that we put people in are boxes that don't fit. Categories help us explain the world. We're all something or something else. It's how we understand the world. It's how we communicate. And in many cases, there's not a thing wrong with that. We would be a fool to not put a bear in the dangerous box. But here's where love comes in. When we talk about humans, boxes don't fit. Because God made each of us individuals. We're all different in some way. And to really understand and to really treat people the way that they want to be treated, we have to understand them. We can't assume things about people. We can't assume things about people. God made each of us as individuals. But we also know that God made all of us to be loved. And if we can get to that place, if we can strive to treat each person as an individual, some maybe we're not so fond of because of how they act or the content of their character. And maybe we don't want to be around them so much. But certainly they're still worthy of love. Others will find that we want to be around a lot more because we like their character. But it won't be because we put them in some predefined box. The boxes don't fit human beings. Categories don't work for human beings. They'll fool us every time. And if we are to achieve the dream, and I think we can one day, we are to achieve the dream, then we have to do it by dealing with people on an individual basis and loving them for who they are. Amen. If I can help somebody as I travel on, if I can cheer somebody with a word or a song, if I can show somebody he's been traveling wrong, then my living shall not be in vain. No, my living shall not be in vain. No, my living shall not be in vain. If I can help somebody as I travel on, then my living shall not be in vain. If I can do my duty as a Christian ought, if I can bring back beauty to a world unwrought, if I can spread love's message like the Master taught, then my living shall not be in vain. No, my living shall not be in vain. No, my living shall not be in vain. If I can help somebody as I travel alone, then my living shall not be in vain. If I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a word of song, if I can share love's message when we're traveling wrong, then my living shall not be in vain. No, my living shall not be in vain. No, my living shall not be in vain. Whoa, if I can help somebody as I travel on, then my living shall not be